know, Deuteronomy is full of the last words of Moses. It's his final speech to the folks who've been wandering in the wilderness just before they take over and inherit the promised land. All they have known is severe poverty their entire life, and all of their dreams, far beyond that, is about to come true in a few short days. And so Moses spends the last month of his life not patting them on the back, not coming up with cheers, yeah, we did it. He gives them a series of warnings as they are about to move suddenly from severe poverty to incredible prosperity. He gives them a series of warnings highlighting a brand new set of problems that prosperity or happiness will provide, some of which they have not seen while they were wandering in the wilderness. And so we've called them the hazards of happiness, and Moses has outlined several of them, and we'll look at the last one today. And I think it's appropriate that we end our list today looking at the very last command Moses offers these people. And the hazard that surrounds this command in all the final chapters of Moses, even the song that this guy writes, is the hazard of becoming too sophisticated. That's hardly ever a problem when you're in poverty, but when you start to prosper, when your pantry starts to get full and your bank account starts to be okay, this is a dangerous hazard. And I'll show you why as we look at it. So look with me in Deuteronomy chapter 30. We'll put the verses on the screen so you can see this. Here's his last command to the people. It's not the only time he says this. He has said these things before. But boy, he sure zeroes in on it here in chapter 30. He says, I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to keep his commands, decrees, and laws. Then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you are entering to possess. This final command that Moses gives these people is to enter into a relationship with him, to simply love. Then it will go well. Then you will live. Love the Lord your God first. Love before you follow, before you obey, and then it will go well. You will live. That is so simple. The message today, his command is very simple. In fact, he even calls it something different a little bit later. It just summarizes it as simply choose. Choose which one you want. Now, I have to confess to you, I admit loving the thrill of taking something very complicated and making it easy to understand. I've always very much enjoyed that. It's actually 1/3 of the reasons I got my degree in mathematics. The other two, one, I was decent at it. Two, I had a guidance counselor that told me it was stupid for me to ever try to do that because math was my worst subject in school. But then the other reason was I thought if I am ever in a job interview and I'm competing against someone who has a psychology degree and a literature degree and a business degree and a management degree and an accounting degree and a general studies degree, and I have the math degree, I believe everyone sitting around that resume table who's looking at mine is going to have all the same reactions. Oh, this one is smart. Because that's how people feel about it. Math is some weird thing that everyone thinks it's more complicated than it actually is, that it's actually more complicated than psychology, which isn't true at all. It's just a different flavor of hard. But everything's hard. If you're going to get a degree in anything, boy, it's going to be hard. Getting a degree in music is not easy. Doesn't matter what it is. It's all hard. But math, for some reason, has this perception of being unattainable. Unless someone brilliant makes it understandable. Now, that's a myth, but I knew that was the perception. So that was one of my motivations in doing that. Now, Moses is going to do the exact opposite today. He is going to take the most simple thing and show me and you, why it's difficult. Instead of taking the complicating and making it easy, he's going to show us the simple and highlight its difficulty. Because the simple things get difficult when we begin to prosper and become too sophisticated. And so I don't know how else to summarize this under this too sophisticated heading, because Moses' charge, as we just saw in verse 16, he wants these people to enter into a relationship with God. And having a relationship with God is simple in one sense, but difficult in another. And here's how I summarize the difficulty of having a relationship with God. And we'll put it on the screen. 1, it's deceptively ordinary. And 2, it's offensively gracious. Deceptively ordinary, offensively gracious. And I'll show you the passages in this paragraph. And in the weeks before, I've been going around different sections of Deuteronomy, and today I'm just staying in one paragraph. I think Moses comes through loud and clear in just this one paragraph, the same things he says in chapters 29, 31, 32, 33, and 34. So look with me as we look at how this is deceptively ordinary in chapter 30, verse 14. Moses tells us, I would say as well, the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so you may obey it. Now, that's important because of what he said just a few sentences ago in chapter 29, verse 29. It's not on the screen, but Moses says the secret things belong to the Lord, but the things revealed belong to us. And then he says, this word is very near. It's very near to you. And so that means how the universe works, how it all fits together is a mystery to us. However, the meaning of life, our purpose on planet Earth, why we are still breathing this very moment, is not a mystery. That's been revealed. That is what Moses says, very near to us. The reason you're breathing is to love the Lord your God, to draw near to Him with a sincere heart, as the author of Hebrews says. That's why you're here. That's why you were made. Not to accomplish something that no one else could accomplish, because someone saw in you a beautiful poem and created you out of love. And therefore, we get to draw near with a sincere heart. We get to follow, but first, we get to love. And so, Moses explains you don't have to be a sophisticated expert to get this. You don't have to spend a week on some retreat to get it. And you don't have to climb a mountain or descend the Grand Canyon to get this. It doesn't take anything huge. It's simple. In fact, it's not just geographically simple. The way to relate to God is literally right under my nose, your nose. It's in every hotel room. It's geographically close. The Bible is the most published book on planet Earth, and interestingly, the most stolen. It's accessible. It's not for the elite. It's not for the most educated. It's everywhere. There's been no piece of literature translated in more languages than the Bible. We still have a few to go. It's supposed to be accessible, but it's not just physically accessible, it's intellectually accessible. Relating to God according to His Word, according to Moses, is very near to you. And the best illustration I can think of is a small village in France called Les Champons. We have a picture of it so you can see how small it is. It's small. You've probably never heard of this village. This village became famous during World War II because this tiny village hid and successfully rescued 3,000 to 5,000 Jews during World War II. The town isn't even 1,000 people. Why did they do that? Oh, clearly it must be a large Jewish town in France. And when you looked at its roots, it's not. In fact, during World War II, it was an enormously large Christian village, full of people who loved and followed Christ. And so in 1990, the nation of Israel recognized Les Champons as, I can't remember the award they got, but it was for remarkable bravery. So there's a big ceremony to recognize this tiny little village in France. And when the Israeli news people went to the village to interview those who were alive during World War II and ask them, what motivated you to risk your lives for these people. And strangely, they all had basically the same response, and it wasn't really movie-worthy. It's why we don't have a movie about it. We never will, because it's actually very ordinary. All of the villagers who were alive then, who were responsible for housing these 3,000 to 5,000 souls, said the same thing. They said it just seemed like a natural thing to do because we were Christians. And these Jewish interviewers said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, our faith is about someone, Jesus Christ, who risked his life and lost his life even to save those people who didn't believe the same things he believed. So it just seems like that's something we should do." We're not risking our lives to save other Christians who agree with us. We're risking our lives to rescue Jewish people who believe we're crazy. That's what motivated them. Why? Did they have a seminary in this village? Did they have access to all the YouTube videos of all the great pastors? Did they have a commentary series written by the greatest minds of the Christian faith? No. They had their Bible. And they said, if the gospel is about one person who risked everything to save those who didn't believe what he believed, shouldn't we do the same? Having a relationship with God is deceptively ordinary. Is it just that? And that gets awarded remarkable bravery. And today, as I look across my Facebook feed and I read the news stories and I talk to people, I recognize we are a long way from this. Christians. If you're not a Christian, I'm not talking to you, but if you are, I am. A few weeks ago, there was a town in Texas where some crazy gunman walked into a church and did the unthinkable and took several lives, over 24 lives. And the outcry for that amongst Christians and Texans and First Baptists, if that's a thing, was huge. Because it was in a small First Baptist church in a tiny little Texas town. And I got notifications about how are we going to help them, what can we do to pray for them. And then not so long ago, there was another church in Egypt where over 24 gunmen entered and killed everybody. Over 300 people. And they stalked the exits to make sure nobody would come out, because if they did, they would take them out. Not only that, my wife explained to me through a news feed that they were also gunning down ambulances who came to try to rescue those who were dying. No outcry. I haven't seen anything on my Facebook feed above it. I have had no Christian contact me and go, "That seems horrible. What can we do to help these people?" And those were men and women and children as well. As my wife was saying as we were driving yesterday, there are moms burying their children today. Now, they don't believe what we believe. So do they deserve our compassion? Yeah. Why? Because that's what the gospel is about. It's about a guy who risked everything and felt everything for people who didn't believe anything he believed. Do you see people constantly agreeing with Jesus in the Gospels, or do you see people constantly arguing with him and not getting it over and over again? And as the people are abusing him and nailing him to a cross, he is saying, "Father, forgive them. They don't believe what I believe." Having a relationship with God it's difficult in its simplicity. It's just merely applying what the gospel implies. It's deceptively ordinary. But that's not it. Not only is the word very near to us and yet far away, it's also offensive. It's offensively gracious. Listen to what Moses says in verse 11. He says, "What I'm commanding you today is not too difficult for you or beyond your reach." It's not too difficult for you. When you read that, do you like that? Because I would say, at least in this country, most people I know don't like to read that. We don't like things that are not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. We like things that are difficult for us. We love things that are beyond our reach because then we can overcome something to get them. I have never heard of anyone brag that they learn things the easy way. Have you? There's two ways to learn things, the easy way and the hard way. And everyone you know, just like everyone I know, brags about being the one who has to learn things the hard way, who has to overcome stubbornness and obvious warning signs. But then if they do that, then they get the badge of overcoming something difficult. And so everyone brags about being the stubborn one who ignores wisdom, because that's what learning the easy way about. And the whole book of Ecclesiastes is about this very thing. Solomon says, you have two ways to learn. Let me record an entire book that shows you all of these roads are dead-end roads. I've gone down them farther than any human being ever has gone down them, or any human being could go down them, and came back and said, don't go here. To provide an easy way to learn, yet everyone ignores that, because who wants to be the one who learns things the easy way? No. We like being the one who learns it the hard way. We love things that are too difficult for us, things that are out of reach, because then, if we conquer them, we have proven our worth. That's what we love. Yes? Yes. Everyone you know is like everyone I know. That's how it is. And so Moses says, this is not too difficult for you. And we go, oh, we want it to be too difficult because every one of us wants to be Indiana Jones. Do you know who Indiana Jones is? I'd kind of forgotten, and then I realized my 14-year-old son had never seen those movies. And so I, like a good father, showed him Indiana Jones movies so he could take a part. And what I noticed through that is this Indiana Jones character is constantly proving his worth by connecting clues that are really far apart, and he is also overcoming all these obstacles, not only with his elite intelligence, he's a college professor, schooled in several languages and several subjects, but he also has incredible skill with a bullwhip. And everyone wants to be Indiana Jones. Everyone wants to go on the adventure and overcome the difficult by using their intellect and all of their gifts to connect the dots. And yes, now I've done it. There's a huge problem. It's beyond what I can do, but I would like to be Indiana Jones. I want the adventure of doing the impossible. And so when Moses says this having a relationship with God, what I'm telling you, what I'm commanding you, it's not too difficult for you. In fact, look what else he says as he goes on to explain how it's not too difficult. He says it's not up in heaven, so that you have to ask, who will ascend into heaven to get it and proclaim it to us so that we may obey it? Nor is it beyond the sea. And in this culture, when they reference sea in the literature, that's a reference to chaos and death, because that's what the sea was to these people. He's saying it's not up there, it's not out there. There's no quest. There's no clues. There's no leap. It's very near. In fact, it's in your heart and your mouth. The relationship that he's commanding us to do, it's not something sophisticated to achieve. Only for the educated and elite and those greatly skilled. It's not that. Loving the Lord your God is just something to receive without any heroics. But Moses says it's not too difficult. And that is offensive to every human being for at least a couple reasons. So here you can ask yourself as you look at these reasons, which one of these two apply to me? Or probably better, which of these two most apply to me? Because they probably both do. Has anyone ever taught you that grace is free? Have you heard that phrase before? I've heard that. It's not correct. It's not completely free. Grace will cost you something. It'll at least cost you two things that I can see. One, it will cost you pride. To accept grace, it is going to cost you, it's going to cost you the right to look down on anyone else for any reason for the rest of your life. Because if everyone is a sinner saved by grace, then you no longer have accomplished more of the quest, connected more of the clues, done more than anybody else. There's not the evil people in society who are ruining it, and you are the good guys having to endure them. That's gone. If you receive grace. If you receive grace, that means we're all a bunch of weirdos with a whole slew of problems. And so to receive grace, you first have to give up the pride of getting to look down on anyone else for any reason ever again. That's costly. And to also receive grace, you also have to give up control. Because if you didn't go on a quest, because there is no quest, if it's just you receiving it, that means you don't get to brag and have the right to call the shots anymore. If your standing in the universe is based completely on grace, then the one who made that standing possible is the one who gets to call the shots, not you. That's what grace means. So grace is free in one sense. We didn't have to do anything to accomplish it. Well, we have to do at least two things to receive it, and that is surrender those two rights. And there are churches full of Christians who've never done that. And when I say Christians, I don't mean people who are. I mean people who call themselves that. Who've been wearing that banner and that umbrella for a long, long time. And they have never given Christ the control for their life. And they've never, and couldn't even contemplate thinking of giving up the right on looking down on people for different reasons. Either because of their religion, or their color, or their economics, or their political issues. There are lots of people who call themselves Christians who will not surrender that. And I can't think of too many things more incompatible with the humble Savior, the suffering servant, who triumphed by losing, than that. So Moses says it's not too difficult for you. And what he means by that, I believe, is what is difficult is that it's not too difficult. It's offensive. The offensive thing I'm telling you is that it's so close, you don't have to go on a quest. You don't have to achieve it. You can't. And then I love how he ends this. And so this is how I'll end it. It's in verses 19 and 20 of this paragraph. Moses says, "This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death." It's so simple. It's black and white. Blessings and curses. And then he urges, now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. All relational words. For the Lord is your life. This is the first time this promise appears in the Bible, certainly the Old Testament. He says there's two choices here. Blessings and life and death. And what he means by life, as you read the rest of Deuteronomy, is if you obey and do the right thing, you get life. If you disobey, you get death. So he says, choose life. Choose obedience. But then, did you see what he said in verse 20? The Lord is your life. The Lord is your obedience. Do you see the gospel in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 19 and 20? I've set before you life and death. Choose life. Choose obedience. I know you can't, or I know you won't. So he says, the Lord is your obedience. The Lord is your life. You can't choose it. You won't choose it. This is the gospel of grace right here in the 5th book of the Old Testament. The Lord is your life. And to be honest, I missed it for a long, long time. I'd never connected those two until I was reading Romans 10. And then I feel like God made it very clear to me. So I'll throw up Romans 10, and it was the New American Standard Bible, because that was just the one I had when I was reading it. And here's what it says. It says, Christ is the end of the law, but there's not a period there. He says, as Paul is explaining to, in fact, when Paul is talking to the Roman Christians, he's quoting Deuteronomy 30. This very paragraph we've been looking at. And he says, Christ is the end of law for righteousness. And then it hit me. That's why there's no quest. That's why it's not beyond our reach. That's why it's not too difficult for us. And that's why we lament not having the adventure. But it doesn't mean there's not an adventure. It doesn't mean there's not a quest. It means, according to Romans 10 and what Moses has said, Jesus went on the quest. Jesus connected the hard clues and the dots. Jesus is the one with the skill who lived the life we could not live, who obeyed in the ways we would not or could not obey. That's what Paul is telling Romans. Christ isn't there to end the law, but he is the end of the law for righteousness. You can't achieve that. You wouldn't achieve it. You couldn't. No worries. Now it's just yours to receive. But you're going to have to let go of two things to receive it. You can't hold on to some things and grab new things. You're going to have to let go of what you got to grab grace. And two of those things are pride and control. You're going to have to let go. The price has been paid. I love the gospel in Deuteronomy. Loving God, having a relationship is simple. And it's difficult in its simplicity. But then Moses says, it's not too difficult for you to make this choice. It's not too difficult to let go of pride and control. But for some of you, you've been sitting in churches reading Bibles and never let go of these, ever. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it's not going to be easy. But it's not too difficult.